Since 2022, the Philadelphia Phillies have been one of the most successful franchises in baseball, making a World Series, NLCS, and NLDS in 3 consecutive seasons. They bring in a loaded roster to 2025 with a blend of guys brought through their minor league system, big-time free agent signings, and some key trades. The Phillies look to be set up perfectly for another successful run in 2025. Will Philadelphia finally be able to make it over the hump and win that World Series that they've been chasing since their last title in 2008? Or will this be another disappointing early playoff exit like last season? Let's take a deep dive into the 2025 Philadelphia Phillies organization. We'll go right into some 2024 team ranks for the Philadelphia Phillies. All of these are completely objective. The rankings formula are in the description of this video. And the Phillies came in as the 2nd ranked major league roster last season. A 3rd ranked major league lineup and an 8th ranked starting rotation really helped the cause. And a defense that took a really big step forward last year, and a solid bullpen helped Philly be one of the most well-rounded teams in baseball. Although they do have some solid top prospects, Philadelphia doesn't have the organization depth that some of the teams here do. Coming in with the 28th ranked minor league pitchers and the 24th ranked minor league hitters, but there will definitely be some guys in that system contributing to this organization very quickly at the major league level. The manager of this team is Rob Thompson. This will be his 5th season here, already in Philadelphia after taking over for Joe Girardi. Really solid record for him, 250 and 185. And then Dave Dombrowski, also in his 5th season here, made the playoffs all but his 1st season as the president of baseball operations. Very good team last year, 95 and 67, 1st in the National League East, 2nd in the National League, only behind the Dodgers. An organization that will absolutely spend money on their baseball product, $248 million on the 2024 payroll, and it went up this year to $289 million. The PECOTA projections are really interesting on this team. They have them at 86 and 76, just sneaking into the playoffs. I wouldn't take these as gospel, just kind of a measure of where some of these predictive models have Philadelphia. And I will say a lot of the high-end teams really get hurt here. They don't go super overzealous on some of these win-loss totals, but they give them a 52.3% chance to make the playoffs. I personally do think they're going to make it this year. In terms of top 100 draft capital, actually a lot, and you don't see that with a lot of these teams with high payrolls. 26, 63, and 100 here for Philadelphia, so 3 picks in the top 100. In terms of top contracts, Zack Wheeler's extension is going to kick in this season. He's making $42 million a year. One of the better starting pitchers in all of baseball. Trea Turner here on that big-time deal, $27.3 million in average annual salary. And then Bryce Harper on a very solid long-term deal here, looking better and better over time, $25.4 million. Last season, they made the playoffs, went to the NLDS, and lost to the New York Mets, who would end up going to the NLCS and losing to the Dodgers. Their park factor, which is a number that shows how much of a hitter's or a pitcher's park you play in, is 101, meaning that Philadelphia is the 6th biggest hitters stadium in all of baseball. A big-time run environment here in Philadelphia. In terms of organization success, some success here. The high A Jersey Shore Blue Claws, 74 and 58, and the low A Clearwater Threshers, 64 and 53 over 500. The other 2 teams, Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs and Reedon Fightin' Phils, under 500 last season. Not the biggest offseason in terms of additions and subtractions for the Phillies, but some pretty solid additions here. We'll start with Jesus Luzardo, a pretty solid pitcher for Miami for a few years, had a step back last season, and the Phillies acquired him at his lowest value. I think a real solid pitcher though, 2.0 projected WAR this season. Max Kepler, brought in from the Minnesota Twins after a long career there, 1-year, $10 million deal, 1.4 WAR on the projections. Jordan Romano, brought in from Toronto after a tough 2024 season, looks to be back to the Romano of past, at least in spring training so far. Joe Ross on a 1-year deal, and Carlos Hernandez here, claimed off waivers from Kansas City. Both of those 2 guys projected 0.1 WAR next season. A couple minor league deals here that I won't go over, aren't on the projected roster right now. And then in terms of big subtractions, Jeff Hoffman, really the big one, an incredible reliever for the Phillies over the past couple seasons, a real good year in 2024, over to Toronto on a pretty sizable free agent deal. Carlos Estevez, pretty solid for Philly after he came over last year, 1.4 WAR last season. Spencer Turnbull, 0.7 WAR in 2024, still a free agent, so could could come back maybe. And then Austin Hayes, really a tough time in Philly after traded over from the Orioles last year. Couple prospects traded in the Luzardo package to Miami, but nobody else in terms of positive WAR major leaguers from last season. Before I go into specifics on this lineup, I'll talk about weighted runs created plus first really quick. Think about it as a general offensive stat that measures all of your productivity at the plate. League average for that stat is 100. Everything above or below that number is going to be the percent better or worse that you were compared to a league average hitter. So for example, Kyle Schwarber projected to be 27% better than league average offensively next season. And we'll get started there. One of the best designated hitters in all of baseball, a big time power bat, projected 38 homers next season, just under 3 WAR as a DH only. Trea Turner, a good shortstop, hasn't had the success that he has in the past in Philadelphia yet, but definitely some decent stretches. Projected a very good season, 4.6 WAR, a 2020 year, 18% better than league average. Bryce Harper made the transition to first base look incredibly easy. One of the better hitters in baseball, 44% better than league average on the projections. 4.6 WAR as well, 31 homers, 10 stolen bases. Alec Bohm still on this roster, 14% better than league average. 17 homers, just under 3 WAR on the projections. Max Kepler, over from Minnesota, projected to be a league average hitter, give you 18 homers this year. JT Realmuto, one of the big time catchers in the game, alongside Nick Castellanos, both projected 103 weighted runs created plus next season. Castellanos over 20 homers. JT Realmuto is going to do a lot of things for you defensively as a catcher. Bryson Stott, a very good young second baseman, projected to be top 10 in baseball at WAR at second base in 2025. Brandon Marsh, a really solid center fielder, projected to be above a league average hitter, 16 homers, 17 stolen bases. On the bench, Rafael, Marchan, Edmundo, Sosa, Kody Clemens, and Johan Rojas, all expect them to play a decent amount this year. This is a pretty juiced lineup. 5 guys in the top 10 of projected WAR at their positions this season. Notice, the only lineup in baseball that doesn't have a player with under 3 years of service time. The Phillies got a ton of vets on this roster. Bryson Stott, the lowest here at just over 3, but a very good veteran lineup here in Philadelphia. The Phillies supplement this lineup with maybe the best rotation in all of baseball. I'll talk about Ranger Suarez here. He's down with an injury right now, but should pitch this season. Projected 2.7 WAR for this Phillies team, but we'll get started with Zack Wheeler, one of the premier pitchers in the game right now. Some of the most consistent stuff over the past few years. Projected almost 5 WAR and a 3.30 ERA over 202 innings. So good is Zack Wheeler. Jesus Luzardo, the new addition, is going to be starting the second game of the season here for the Phillies. Projected a 4.15 ERA and 2.0 WAR, 157 innings. Aaron Nola also projected top 30 at his position in WAR this year with 3.5. A long-time Philly, a guy that they have extended for a while. Cristopher Sanchez, maybe one of the bigger breakout picks of this season. We'll get into why when we go over his breakdown, but very excited for him. Taijuan Walker, I'm not going to break him down, but a pitcher that's been around for a while, had a couple really solid seasons, saw a lot of his metrics tick back in recent years. He's projected 0.1 WAR this season and will be opening in the rotation with Suarez injured. Andrew Painter, Kyle Tyler, and Michael Mercado alongside Mick Abel and a couple other names could give innings in this rotation. Another real solid unit here in this Phillies bullpen, Jordan Romano is penciled in to be the closer right now, projected a pretty solid season. Orion Kerkering was great for the Phillies last year, a young reliever, very excited for what his future looks like. A trio of lefties in this bullpen and Jose Alvarado, Matt Strahm, and Tanner Banks. Strahm and Banks were both very good. Strahm was incredible for Philly last year. Jose Ruiz, a solid right-hand reliever, projected a 4.27 ERA. And then the 2 new offseason guys, Joe Ross, brought over from Milwaukee on a free agent deal, can start some games, had 10 starts for the Brewers last season. And then Carlos Hernandez, projected to be a mid-inning guy here with a 4.18 ERA, 23% strikeout rate, but does walk about 10% of batters. Before I get into these individual player breakdowns, I'll go over some of the numbers on the screen here. On the player cards, weighted runs created plus, remember league average for that is 100. WOBA stands for weighted on base average. That's just a way to measure the way that you get on base. In this calculation, a homer is way more than a triple, which is way more than a double, etc. League average for that stat is 310. All of the percentile rankings rankings are going to be run values by Baseball Savant, so offensive, base running, and defensive run values. That'll be ranked in terms of the league. And then on the Baseball Savant card, a bunch of metrics: defensive, base running, plate discipline, hard hit numbers, and then some expected stats. And we'll get started here with JT Realmuto, one of the premier names at the catching position in the game. Came over to Philadelphia from Miami a few years ago in a trade. Really solid offensively, 9% better than league average at the catcher position is definitely a plus. A guy who offensively underperformed a few of his metrics last year, so we would expect that offensive profile to result in a better season. Finished right around the middle in all of the run values, offense at 50, base running at 44, and defense in the 45th percentile. A guy who's been very good, though, in terms of value since he came over to Philadelphia, a 762 OPS last season and an 820 the year before that. Kind of some weird numbers for him defensively. In 2023, he was actually one of the worst catchers in defensive run value. Last year, he was about league average, and the few years before that, he was one of the best defensive catchers in the game. His framing has really fallen off since a very good 2021 and very solid seasons before that defensively, but his blocking has gotten a bit worse. He's still really solid at throwing out runners. Offensively, a lot of the same. Really a down year in 2023 in terms of a lot of the metrics. He came back with the metrics last year, but the results didn't follow. Realmuto got better in the second half last year, a 788 OPS post All-Star break with 2 solid months in August and September. I would expect JT Realmuto to take a bit of a step up offensively next year. And Rafael Marchan, one of the better backup catchers in all of baseball. On a rate basis, he's been incredible, but a very small sample size in the majors. All of the expected stats loved him last year. He was 46% better than league average in his 17-game sample year, about a league average fielder, so can be a very valuable player, still only 26 years old and a switch hitter. A guy that, funny enough, an 810 OPS in 40 major league games, but in his minor league career, a 677 OPS in 441 games. Not a guy with a ton of pop, more of a bat-to-ball hitter, but a very good walk rate in the minors and always had decent on-base numbers throughout his career. A guy that's dealt with a bit of injury and underperformance throughout his entire career in the minors, but maybe the catcher of the future here for the Philadelphia Phillies. One of the most famous baseball players since he was 18 years old, Bryce Harper had an incredible season last year transitioning over to first base. 96th percentile in offensive run value for him, 45% better than league average, 30 homers in 145 games. Unfortunately for outfielders on big contracts everywhere, Bryce Harper made the defensive transition to first base look just a little too easy last year after he finished in the top 10th percentile in outs above average. One of the premier hitters in the game for a long time, his age 32 season, just about 5 wins per 162 above replacement per season the last 3 years. Really the only flaw in his game offensively is the chase rates and the strikeouts. But last season, that K rate was at about a league average, so it didn't really hurt him too much. Harper has definitely made that money work for Philadelphia, coming over on a big-time deal from the Washington Nationals, and he has competed every year of his career. The last 3 seasons for him, an 898, 900, and 878 OPS. Last year, his longest season in a pretty long time, 145 games. Has been dealing with some injuries, but not ones that have knocked him out for a majority of the season. Took a step back in a couple areas in terms of the expected stats and the hard hit rates, but nothing really too bad. Got off to a really good start last year, a 982 OPS pre-All-Star, but did slow down a little bit as the season went on, a 793 in the second half. A very good 17 plate appearances in October for Harper last season with a 1.279 OPS. This is your guy if you're a Phillies fan, one of the best hitters in the game and made the transition seamlessly to first base last year. Bryson Stott here is the second baseman for Philadelphia. Took a step back offensively last year after a seemingly breakout 2023 season. 12% worse than league average as a hitter last year, but he does bring you a ton of value as a base runner. 32 stolen bases, 96th percentile run value. Still very good in a lot of the plate discipline areas. Doesn't whiff and doesn't strike out very often compared to league average. All of the hard hit numbers just took a pretty big step down last year, and that really contributed to his lack of offensive success. Stott had a 748 OPS in 2023, 15 homers, 31 steals. steals. The hard hit numbers were up a little bit that year, but not by a significant amount. His strikeout rates and chase rates were actually even better in 2023, but Stott definitely did overperform a decent amount of his metrics in that 2023 season and kind of regressed to the mean a little bit in 2024. Took a pretty scary step back defensively last year as well, 99th percentile in outs above average in 2023 compared to 53rd last year. His 69 innings at shortstop did actually hurt that run value as well. He was a -1 run value at shortstop. Not really sure what to make of the season from Bryson Stott. Maybe this is what we're going to see more often going forward, but still a pretty high floor second baseman in the fact that he can go out and get you a bunch of stolen bases, really good base runner. Would like to see that defense take a step back this year, and that would make him a really high floor player even if the offense doesn't come. So Alec Bohm, the starting third baseman here for the Phillies, seemingly a pretty controversial player for the organization, was in a lot of trade talks this offseason. I think he's a really solid player though. 15% better than league average offensively, 15 homers, all of the metrics are really good. Not a big time on base guy, but he hits the ball pretty hard. The expected numbers liked him a lot. He really doesn't strike out ever, and it is a plus defender at third base as well, 77th percentile in defensive and offensive run value. Understandably, Bohm did really struggle down the stretch last season, but his season numbers ended in a really good place, and he was a really positive player for Philadelphia, 3.5 fWAR last season. A 681 OPS in the second half for Alec Bohm. After getting off to a very good first half, that 830 OPS and 11 homers in the first half, it was definitely an issue with the power. The bat speed went down just a little bit. I went and looked at it. A really tough month of September for him, a 502 OPS and a really bad playoff series for Bohm. But I think these are just the things that come with the full baseball season. There's going to be stretches where guys aren't as good sometimes. That's just what happens when you have such a big sample of a baseball season. I think Alec Bohm is a very good player, a very good third baseman, and I'm really glad that Philadelphia kept him. I think he's going to have a good year here in Philly. Trea Turner here at shortstop on that 11-year, $300 million deal over from the Dodgers a couple off seasons ago. A pretty good season for him offensively, 349 WOBA, almost 2020 in only 121 games. A guy who hasn't really seen a steep decline in his offensive production, but metrically there's been a lot of steps back. Really overperformed his expected numbers last year. That expected WOBA almost 30 points different, and defensively has taken a bit of step back as well, 33rd percentile in defensive run value, although his base running is still very good, 88th percentile and way up there in sprint speed. Actually a better season offensively in terms of surface level stats last year, an 807 OPS compared to a 779 in 2023. Although the metrics actually did favor him by a decent amount that season, a lot of the hard hit rates are really down for Trea Turner, and the defense, while it's never been incredible for him, never been way up there in outs above average, has taken a pretty sizable leap back with Philadelphia. That being said, Trea Turner is still a very valuable player in the fact that he's one of the fastest guys in the game, makes a lot of contact with the ball, hits lefties very well, and he had a 941 OPS in the first half last year. That second half, a lot different, the 687 OPS. So I still think Trea Turner is a very solid player, don't get me wrong. I just think there's a lot of warning signs metrically for him to take a step back offensively this season. Max Kepler brought into Philadelphia on a 1-year, $10 million deal after a very good 2023 season, regressed a bit offensively last year, was really crushing the baseball in 2023. Those hard hit rates were incredible. Regressed to about league average in most of the metrics last year, 6% worse than league average offensively, 8 homers in 105 games. One thing to notice with Max Kepler, last season hit left-handed pitching very well, right-handed pitching not very well at all. Historically, very good against right-handed pitching. That's something that he's really excelled at with Minnesota. So I think there's definitely some positive regression to be had for Max Kepler in 2025. A very good season defensively for him, about a league average runner. A 2023 season with an 816 OPS and about 500 plate appearances, 24 home runs, average exit velocity and barrel rates over 80% in baseball. In that 2023 season, an 832 OPS against right-handed pitching. Last year, a 672 in 317 plate appearances. He hasn't really gotten the opportunity to hit lefties as much the past few years, really turning himself into a platoon bat. I'm really interested to see what Philadelphia decides to do with him. Do they see him as an everyday outfielder? Will he just hit against right-handed pitching? But I think really a bargain on a 1-year, $10 million deal, really a prove-it year for Max Kepler. I think he makes a leap back to the Max Kepler of 2023 this season. Brandon Marsh will take over the center field spot, at least against right-handed pitching this year. Pretty solid season from him metrically last season. The hard hit rates, pretty solid. Barrel rates, pretty solid. Average exit velocity, very good. A bit over a league average hitter. Really good base runner, 82nd percentile, and an above average defender. Marsh's biggest issues at the plate, he strikes out a very large amount, over 30% of the time last year, and he really struggles against left-handed pitching as well, really only a right-hand platoon bat. But with that being said, does hit right-handed pitching very well and can definitely be a positive contributor to this team. In 830 OPS in 2023, but everything metrically is very similar for him. The strikeout rate was cut a little bit. He actually hit the ball a bit harder last season. That 2023 year, he was about a league average hitter against left-handed pitching, 717 OPS and 110 plate appearances. If he can do that again this season, he'll be a well above average player. Marsh cooled off a bit in the second half last year, a 703 OPS post All-Star, a 780 first half. In the playoff series for Marsh last year, not very good, 13 at-bats, just one hit, but a very small sample there for him. I like Brandon Marsh as his primary center fielder against right-handed pitching. Another guy where I'm very interested to see if Philadelphia leaves him in against lefties or if somebody on this bench takes over for him. After a really tough start to his 2024 campaign, Nick Castellanos really clawed his way back offensively and saved his season stats, ending as an above-average hitter and really finishing off the second half strong. Some of his expected numbers were actually pretty solid last season. The issue with Castellanos is he isn't going to bring you anything base running or defensive wise. He actually takes away a decent amount of value just being out there defensively, but you kind of have to have him in the outfield with Kyle Schwarber on this team. For Castellanos to bring a lot of value to this roster, he has to be a very solid hitter, and he really hasn't been the Castellanos that he has been in the past on this deal with the Phillies, but very good numbers against left-handed pitching last season, and I mentioned those expected stats are pretty good for him. A bit of a step back in terms of some of the hard hit metrics for Castellanos last year, but he was hitting the ball at much more advantageous launch angles and pulling it a decent amount more last year, which led to a bit of a decline in his stats, but not a harsh decline, still a 742 OPS and 23 homers. I mentioned he really finished off that season strong, an 839 OPS post All-Star for Castellanos last year, and in 17 plate appearances in the playoffs, a 1.059 OPS. So he really did turn his season around. A guy that's not going to bring a ton of value to this team, as I mentioned, because of the defense and the base running, actually was a negative value in his first year in this contract here with the Phillies. 1.3 WAR in 2023 and 0.4 last season. So Castellanos really has to be a good hitter to bring value to this team. Unfortunately, he hasn't really been that. I think some of the numbers are fine for Castellanos. If he continues to do what he did in the second half last year, we could see a valuable player, but I'm not 100% sold on Castellanos as a value to this team. At designated hitter, one of my favorite players in all of baseball in Kyle Schwarber, one of the most fun baseball savant pages to look at in my opinion. The dude strikes out all the time, he walks all the time, but he hits the ball hard all the time. He has 3 true outcomes personified, meaning he's going to strike out, walk, or hit a homer in a majority of his plate appearances, but man, it works. He gets on base at an incredible rate. He hits the ball super hard, 38 homers last season, 35% better than league average. Offensively, he's not going to bring you anything as a base runner or a defender. He actually didn't even play enough defense to qualify, but he was -1 outs above average last year. One of the sweeter lefty swings in the game, a guy that crushes both sides of the plate. Will be a free agent at season's end, but one of the best hitters in the game, actually underperformed a decent amount of his expected metrics last season. I'm expecting a big time contract year out of Kyle Schwarber, a guy who's been doing it for a long time, over 4,600 career plate appearances over time with the Cubs and Phillies, and 834 OPS. His best season really in a lot of categories last year, but he had a few less homers, just wasn't hitting the ball at advantageous launch angles as much. That launch angle sweet spot percent went down from 48th percentile in baseball to 24th percentile. So if he can get that up, you expect more homers from him. But 47 and 46 homers in 2023 and 2022, 38 last year. An old head's least favorite baseball player, never going to hit for a high average, but his on base is going to be incredible every season. He'll slug and really do everything metrically in terms of hitting the ball hard very well. Kyle Schwarber, Schwarber, a professional hitter at the designated hitter position and one of my favorite players to watch in the game. Going into this bench, we'll start with Edmundo Sosa. Actually been a very solid player since he came over to Philadelphia from St. Louis. A plug-and-play defensive replacement that was actually an above-average bat last year. Really given some value here for Philadelphia the past couple seasons. 2.5 WAR per 162. Kody Clemens, the left-handed bat on this bench, just below league average offensively last season, only 44 games. Struck out Shohei Ohtani one time as a position player pitching, so I gotta say that. Hopefully the algorithm will help me out a little bit. And then Johan Rojas here. Big-time defensive outfielder and a great base runner. Not very good offensively. Had a solid 2023 season, but really a big step back in a lot of areas last year. Although only 24 years old, I think he'll play a lot this season against left-handed pitching and will definitely be a defensive replacement at times in this outfield. Two guys in Sosa and Rojas, pretty high floor bench players and nice pieces to have. Both can play great defense and base run, and then Kody Clemens can hit against right-handed pitching, primarily a first baseman. That'll bring us to the pitching section of this video. We'll get started with Zack Wheeler. I'll go over some of the numbers here on the screen. On the cards, FIP stands for fielding independent pitching. Just see it as a projector of ERA over a big sample. So we would have expected Zack Wheeler's ERA to be closer to 3.13 last season. Stuff Plus and Location Plus, two models built by Eno Saris at Fangraphs, do a very good job at measuring how good a pitcher's stuff is and how good they are at locating their pitches. League average for that stat is going to be 100. It works exactly the same as weighted runs created plus. On the bottom left are going to be pitch usages and their miles per hour. The Baseball Savant page is going to be a majority of the same stuff. And on the right side is going to be run values again. So pitching run value, fastball, breaking, and off-speed run values. And we'll get started with, in my opinion, the best pitcher in baseball over the past few seasons. Zack Wheeler led the majors in WAR per season the last 3 years. Just an incredible season last year. 200 innings, a 2.57 ERA. The FIP is a bit higher, but the expected stats were very close to that ERA. 99th percentile in pitching run value, 99th in fastball run value. I cannot believe that he hasn't won a Cy Young the past couple seasons. Metrically took a really big step forward in a lot of areas last year, got more chases, was giving up less hard contact. Just an incredible pitcher here in Zack Wheeler. The last 3 seasons for Wheeler, that 2.57 last season, a 3.61 in 2023, a 2.82 in 2022 in terms of ERA, 200, 192, and 153 innings pitched. Added a splitter to his arsenal last season as if he needed any more help, and that pitch was nasty, a 173 WOBA against last year. Zack Wheeler is going to be a Cy Young candidate anytime that he steps foot on that mound for an entire season. One of the best pitchers in baseball, if not the best. Zack Wheeler, an incredible one to have in this rotation for Philadelphia. The number 2 starter in this rotation to open up the season will be the Phillies' big fish of this offseason, no pun intended, and Jesus Luzardo, brought over from the Marlins. I'm a big-time Jesus Luzardo fan. Admittedly, a pretty tough season for him last year. He was dealing with some injury and some lack of performance. Although I wouldn't say the ERA necessarily measures what he gave last season in terms of his pitching, still a bit of a step back in a lot of categories metrically, and the stuff took a pretty big tick backwards. I think a lot of that did have to do with the injury, but just gave up a lot of hard contact last year, wasn't getting the strikeouts that he had in the past. He was still league average as a pitcher in run value, and his off-speed pitch in the changeup was very good last year, 83rd percentile in run value there, but 2 great seasons before this in Miami for Luzardo, a 3.58 and a 3.32 ERA those 2 years. I mentioned a lot of the strikeout stuff took a tick back last year. He was always in the upper percentiles in baseball in the whiff rates and K rates, but a season filled with injuries, missed a couple weeks with elbow tightness in late April, and then was shut down for a majority of the season with a lumbar stress reaction. I think we're seeing a healthy Jesus Luzardo here in spring. The fastball numbers seem to be back, and I think we're going to get a good year out of Jesus Luzardo in his first year in this Phillies rotation. Aaron Nola slotted in to make the 3rd start of the season here for the Phillies, and one of the best volume guys in all of baseball, nearing 200 innings each of the last 3 seasons. Nola performs as well, a 3.57 ERA, a 3.94 FIP last season, stuff and location plus both above league average, really right about above league average in a majority of the metrics. A bit of a scary sign as the fastball velo is down year by year for Nola, but so far he's been able to work around it a bit. The breaking pitches for him last year were incredible. The curveball, one of the best pitches in baseball last year, and that's actually his primary pitch. 33% of the time he throws that curveball. A tough 2023 season for Aaron Nola after signing a pretty big deal of 4.46 ERA, but 193.2 innings for him that year. Metrically, pretty much the exact same season in 2024, so he really regressed to that mean positively last year. The pitch usage all relatively the same from 2023 to 2024. He had a 22 season where he was one of the best pitchers in baseball and really earned that big contract. A 3.25 ERA in 205 innings in 2022. You don't see innings like that on arms very often. All of the metrics have regressed a bit, but that doesn't mean Aaron Nola is a bad pitcher by any means. Still a big-time innings eater, hoping for a big WAR season from Aaron Nola here again in 2025. Cristopher Sanchez as the 4 starter in this rotation is just outrageous. 4.7 WAR for Cristopher Sanchez last year, a 3.32 ERA, the FIP is even lower. Did an incredible job at limiting hard contact last year, gets a ton of chases, a ton of ground balls. Only a 3-pitch pitcher, but that slider is the best pitch in baseball by run value. In a 100th percentile pitcher in off-speed run value, the sinker did get hit a bit last year, but the changeup was well above average, leading to an 88th percentile pitching run value performance by Sanchez last year. 2 great seasons in a row for Cristopher Sanchez, a 3.44 ERA and 99.1 innings in 2023. A lot of the same metrics, but really took a step forward in limiting hard contact this year. And finally gave a full season of innings, and man, was it good. 181.2 innings this season. He cut the slider usage by a little bit this season. If I could tell Cristopher Sanchez anything, I would probably say use that slider more because it is an awesome pitch. Not a big-time strikeout guy, but a guy that gets a ton of chases, and the average exit velocity, hard hit rates, barrel rates are all very good. Love Cristopher Sanchez as a pitcher in this rotation. Ranger Suarez here as the 5 starter, expected to start the season on the injured list with back soreness, but I do expect him to make a decent amount of starts this season when he comes back, so I'm going to break him down. A guy who's been really solid for Philadelphia the last 3 years, but really took a step forward last season in almost every metric and the WAR. 3.5 fWAR on the season last year. Such a good location pitcher, 9% better than league average in the location area. Limited hard contact very well last year. The barrel rates, hard hit rates, and average exit velocity very low. A guy who doesn't get a ton of strikeouts, but the expected numbers are solid. Doesn't throw super hard, but he does a lot of things well here as a pitcher. Last season, cut the sinker usage by just a tick, and the curve and 4-seam ended up being equal at 19%. Did throw that 4-seam a bit more in 2023. A 4.18 ERA and 125 innings in 23. A 3.65 and 155.1 in 2022. So he's never given a full season of innings. He's going to miss some time here and there. But last season was really the first that he put it all together as a pitcher. A big time playoff performer for Philadelphia as well, has been nails in some playoff starts. And if this guy is penciled in as your 5 starter, you feel so good about this rotation. What a starting 5 here in Philadelphia. So let's get into this bullpen here for the Philadelphia Phillies. We'll start with the high leverage guys, and Jordan Romano currently penciled in to be the closer. A really weird year for him last year in Toronto. 13.2 innings, a 6.59 ERA, and a 6.17 FIP. The stuff took a big tick backwards, but a guy that's been very solid in the past. A 2.90 ERA in 2023 and a 2.11 in 2022. Dealing with injury and underperformance last year, gave up a ton of hard hit contact when he was out there in that really small sample. The expected ERA was even a 7.60 for him last year. The fastball velo is back up a little bit for Jordan Romano though, and the Phillies are hoping that he can slide into this closer role seamlessly. Fortunately, if he can't, Orion Kerkering is here as one of the best relievers in all of baseball. Yes, I'm saying that. One of the best relievers in all of baseball. A 2.29 ERA for Kerkering last year, a 2.42 FIP. His stuff is off the charts, 20% better than league average. Big time strikeout guy, but he doesn't give up any hard contact. Doesn't walk a ton of guys either. Really does everything well. The sweeper is a great pitch. 2 solid fastballs as well. I think the long-term closer here in Philadelphia. And then Jose Alvarado, 29 years old, a bit of a step back in a couple areas for him last year. The peripheral numbers, the stuff went way down, and the location took a really big step back after a really solid 2023 in locating his pitches. The ERA and the FIP both took a big step backwards, and he walked more guys last year. But reliever being a very volatile position, I do believe that Alvarado has the stuff to make it work again in 2024, and I think the Phillies are going to lean on that as well. Getting into the rest of this bullpen, and we'll start out with Matt Strahm, one of the the most impressive non-closer seasons as a reliever in recent memory, a 1.87 ERA, 2.29 FIP, struck out over 33% of batters he faced last year. Didn't really walk anybody either. A lot of the metrics are very good on him. Matt Strahm had an incredible season for this Phillies team last year. Jose Ruiz, 51 innings last year, a 3.71 ERA, not a great season, but nothing really bad on his card either. A big-time pitch mix guy, and he actually had some solid metrics, although nothing really jumps off the page. A decent middle reliever here in Jose Ruiz. Tanner Banks came over from the White Sox last year and was really good for Philadelphia. Overall, a 3.98 ERA, a 3.25 FIP, a lot of innings, 72.1 for him last season. Joe Ross came over from Milwaukee in a free agent deal. Started some games, came out of the bullpen sometimes. I thought he was very good, watching him a lot last year. And then Carlos Hernandez here on a roster crunch move. After being claimed off waivers by the Royals, a solid season last year. 30 innings, a 3.30 ERA, 3.50 FIP. The walk rate is a bit concerning, although the metrics are pretty solid for him. If he can locate his pitches a bit better, a really decent reliever here at the back end. That'll bring us into the top prospect section of this video. Only one top 100 guy in this system, but number 9 in the top 100 in Andrew Painter. Just 21 years old, has missed the past couple seasons with Tommy John surgery and elbow issues. Those stats on the screen are from his 2022 season where he spent time between A-ball, high A, and double A, but he came back to the Arizona Fall League this offseason and he pitched exactly like he did in those 2022 games, leaving a lot of room for hope for Andrew Painter going forward. The 13th overall pick in the 2021 draft, joined a group of only Dylan Bundy, Chad Billingsley, Forrest Whitley, Zach Greinke, and Clayton Kershaw to make it to Double A in their first full professional seasons by a high school drafted pitcher. Reaches up to triple digits on his fastball and was doing that again this year. Big time pitches for Painter with that fastball and the slider. A big time control artist. They call him Painter for a reason. A guy who I think is really quickly going to make this rotation in Philadelphia. Just has to show that he has the durability to make it through a full season. And I expect some really solid numbers out of Andrew Painter in the future. A very good number 1 prospect here. Aiden Miller, the number 2 prospect here, the first overall pick in the 2023 draft. Out of high school, Philly signed him away from going to Arkansas, a shortstop with a pretty good swing and some pretty solid numbers in the minors. In his first full season as a pro, got all the way up to Double A and was a plus hitter there. Really solid hit and power tools. Not certain about his status as a shortstop long term, although his fielding has never been an issue. I could see him moving to second or third base. And then Eduardo Tate here, a very young catcher that already made it up to A-ball and really crushed it there. A big time hitter, not as much of a defender, somebody I could see moving to first base or DH as a long-term player, but a great bat, a 50 hit tool, a 60 on the power, a beautiful swing. Left-handed hitting catcher, got off to a bit of a slow start in the complex league and then started crushing the baseball. I think a guy with a lot of helium in prospect circles, a guy that could rise up these boards really quickly. Let's go through some of these notable infield prospects here for the Phillies. We'll start with Devin Saltaban, a second base prospect with some pretty solid tools across the board. The power and run both very good. Spent the entirety of his first full pro season at low A last year and was 3rd in the Florida State League in homers. Big time power for a smaller frame guy and a very good second half in terms of results for him. Also a guy that could be seen to move to outfield, played a bit of center field when he was younger and some scouts think he might move back there over a long term. Brian Rincon, a former 14th round pick by the Phillies in 2022, a very solid defender, but not a very developed hit or power tool for him. Injured last season and missed most of the year, but was starting off very good last season, a 920 OPS over the first half of May, and then missed all of the season until August, came back and struggled a bit at the end of the year, but an above average runner and a good fielder in Rincon. Carson DeMartini, a 3-year Virginia Tech baseball player, an OPS over 1,000 in all of his 3 years at Virginia Tech. Not a big standout tool for him, more of an average guy across the board, but always has had really solid stats throughout college and only played 24 games in low A last year. And then former international signing out of Venezuela in 2022, Arun Escobar, 20 years old. Big time plate discipline for him, really solid in the walk rates and doesn't swing and miss very often. His hit tool is definitely his carrying tool, not big time power and not a great fielder. Likely will spend a majority of the season at low A Clearwater. And then Otto Kemp, a guy who played 4 years at Division II Point Loma Nazarene in San Diego. Phillies signed him as an undrafted free agent, and he had an incredible season last year. 16 homers, went from low A all the way up to triple A. Will likely go back to triple A to start the season this year. Might make the majors this season. A really fun story. A very solid outfield here in the Phillies minor league system. We'll start with Justin Crawford, son of Carl Crawford. 20 years old, already up in double A. A 70 run tool is definitely his carrying tool, but also a very solid hitter. Led the organization in hits and stolen bases last year with 143 and 42, but a guy that doesn't really hit the ball in the air very often. A 61% ground ball rate last year, so the power tool really has yet to develop yet. Still only 20 years old and a lot of development to be had. Not a plus defender in the outfield, but a very good runner, so you think that could come with time. Definitely a player that needs some development, but big time tools. Griffin Burkholder, a high school draftee out of last season, kept away from West Virginia by Philadelphia. Only debuted in one game, his first pro season, and missed the rest of the season because of a pulled hamstring. Some very solid tools for him though. A big time runner similar to Crawford. Really solid in the fielding and arm areas. Likely to return to low A to start the season in 2025. Gabriel Rincones, a guy that definitely has a shot at the major leagues this season, but missed a decent amount of the year last year because of injuries. Spent most of his time at double A last season, and 11 homers, 26 extra base hits in just 59 games at double A last year. Dante Nori, the Phillies' first round pick last year, 27th overall out of high school. Big time speed and big time defense on Dante Nori's profile, and has shown solid raw power in his batting practices. Didn't get much of a run in the minors, only 16 games, but a guy that I'm excited for moving forward. And then TJ Walton, finally, a guy that really has some solid tools across the board, but has yet to play very often, limited throughout his minor league career due to injuries. Big time power in his bat, but definitely some hit tool questions for TJ. And then a pitching system here gifted to them by Baltimore were these first two guys last year in Moises Chase and Seth Johnson. Seth Johnson actually made his major league debut with the Phillies last year, showed some solid metrics. A trio of very good pitches with the fastball, curveball, and cutter all over 55. The control is definitely an issue for Seth Johnson though. Moises Chase, another guy that really sped through the system. A breakout year last season, got all the way up to double A at just 21 years old, the number 5 prospect in the system. Another trio of pitches here that are very solid. The fastball, slider, and sweeper all above a 55, with the changeup being a solid pitch too. Mick Abel, a guy with 4 very good pitches, but it really has been limited because of his walk issues in the minor leagues. Had a ton of prospect hype in the past, was all the way up there in the Philly system, and has really taken a step back the past couple years. Still very good stuff, just needs to work on locating his pitches better, and he can move up. Could make his major league debut this season. Gene Cabrera, 2++ pitches in the fastball and the changeup, added to the 40-man roster after last season. 4th most strikeouts in the Phillies system over the past 2 years, 23 years old in double A last season. And then Griff McGarry, a reliever prospect. I like having one reliever prospect on every notable prospect list, and a guy that I think could make his major league debut this year. Big time fastball, big time slider. The control is a big issue for McGarry though. Very similar to a guy having to cover up his hit tool with a very good power tool. He has to do that with his control and his very good fastball. Really solid shape on that fastball, gets up to 97 miles an hour. Walked 24% of the hitters he faced last year, but the stuff is just so good. It's so hard to quit Griff McGarry. And I'll talk about a Baseball America projected 2028 lineup here real quickly. The catcher Eduardo Tate, the number 3 prospect in this Phillies system, is going to lead off a group that is mostly made up of minor league players. Bryce Harper, Trea Turner, Johan Rojas, and Alec Bohm are the only guys here with major league experience. Outside of that, a lot of minor league guys, but some dudes that I really like on this list. Big fan of Aiden Miller. I think if he ends up being a third baseman long term, that would be a very good fit for him, although I am a bit concerned about Trea Turner at second base defensively long term. Justin Crawford, I do really like as a prospect, and he's a guy who I think is going to develop very well. Johan Rojas, if he can get that bat going, really like him in center field, just has such a high floor as a player. Griffin Burkholder, a really interesting one. Need to see a bigger sample, obviously, in the minor leagues, but I think a guy that could make his major league debut pretty quickly. I do like Alec Bohm and Bryce Harper long term. I think their bats definitely translate to a solid career. And then Carson DiMartini they have at shortstop. Starlin Caba was here really as that long-term shortstop, but traded to Miami in the Jesus Luzardo deal. In terms of this projected 2028 rotation, now we are talking. Interest League did not have Zack Wheeler in the starting five. I wonder if that's a sort of retirement thing, because I think as long as Zack Wheeler is pitching and is healthy, he's going to be a top starter in baseball. But they do have Aaron Nola here at 35 years old. Andrew Painter, I am so excited to see what he does this season. Hopefully he can make his Major League debut in 2025 and those elbow issues are behind him. Cristopher Sanchez as a long-term piece, I am a big fan of. I think he has stuff that can really translate to a long career. Ranger Suarez, again, another guy not going to overpower you with any fastballs or anything, a big-time deception artist and a guy that I think can have a very long major league career. Hopefully those injury issues aren't anything of note. And I do like Moises Chase as the 5 starter in this rotation, although there's a lot of other guys that I would be interested in. Orion Kerkering, I definitely think is this team's long-term answer at closer. Love what I've seen from him in the major league so far, and I think he's going to be a stud in the back end of this bullpen for a long time to come. And then finally, just some final thoughts on what I think the Phillies organization is going to be like this season. I'm a big fan of this lineup. I think there's a lot of depth here. I really like what I see in some of the metrics from guys like Schwarber and Harper and Bohm. I am not without my concerns, though, on some of the guys in this lineup. Castellanos and Trea Turner come to mind. They do play in a very tough division. The Mets got a lot better. The Braves, I think, are going to have a bounce-back season here in 2025. And the wild cards, I think, did get a bit stronger. Teams like the Cubs and the Brewers, the Diamondbacks, and the Padres, all going to be on that line this season. It's going to be very interesting. I think this rotation can really carry the team, though. Might be the best in all of baseball. And I don't really have any big-time concerns about the back end of this bullpen. Guys like Matt Strahm can also contribute. I think Philly most likely makes the playoffs here in 2025. This was a really fun one to do. Thank you guys so much for listening. This was a deep dive on the 2025 Philadelphia Phillies organization.